I like whoever's playing the news. Thank you.
And we're now live on YouTube. Okay. So we'll give it 10 minutes to say, and then we'll start proceedings.
Can you send me the YouTube link, please?
I can send you the YouTube link. I'll put it in the. I'll pop it in Slack.
Nice one. Cheers.
There you go.
Thanking you. It's really weird having this light here. This is its lowest setting.
Yes. The next thing we need to get you is like so you've got like a proper microphone now as well, and so you can get light rings where you put or at least a stand where you put the webcam behind it or in it.
I can put my phone in this if I want to because it's for selfies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. I don't take selfies really.
Take that around with you.
I mean, who would do that? Why?
Not just like me. I've invested. I've got a very expensive webcam, a very expensive microphone, and yet I've decided I'm just going to lay on the sofa with my built-in ones.
Yeah, it's convenience. I mean, if they put it on a stick, well, we'd be having a different conversation. No? Okay. Yeah. It's quite cool though. Oh, I might.
Now, my next thing for in here is color changing light strips. Is the next thing for in here.
That's cool. I can change the color of my lamp, of my light, but I don't know. I don't know where the remote is. Oh, that's not flattering. Okay. I'm not doing that. No. Oh, sure. You said we're on YouTube, aren't we? I should probably stop doing this.
Good evening, everybody. How are you all doing?
I'm going to assume that means everybody's great.
Yeah.
Brand.
Terrible.
Are you off for time already?
Just a bit shy. That's okay.
Okay, so we'll give it till 22 and excuse me, and then we'll get going.
Bless you.
I found the appropriate dog. I'd set up the thingy earlier, the cover art for the last part of the series of Agile Principles. So I went and found another dog agility picture. I've been trying to find one of the same dog all the way through, but there isn't.
It would have helped if we'd known how many were going to be in the series when we started, I suppose.
It would, but that comes with making it up as we go along. So,
your dog's opposed to doing that. I mean, Sadie's super agile, right?
I know that right now she's currently asleep across the entire sofa. So let's go with Dave. And she might make an appearance because I think I've heard her rustling around. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
Good girl.
I love Dalmatians.
You good girl? That's the microphone. Don't do that.
Where are the other 100?
I don't have a house big enough.
Oh. Neither did Cruella de Vil, but it didn't stop her.
That is true.
I guess that wasn't really her end goal.
No. And there were smaller ones as well.
Puppies.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's very beautiful.
When she wants to be, aren't you?
Is that one Sadie?
Yes, it's a Sadie.
Hello, Sadie.
And the other two are the cats who are, I think, probably asleep on the bed upstairs. Hello.
That's the life, isn't it?
Get
Should I
down.
be asleep on the bed?
Okay. Good evening, everybody who is joining us on YouTube. So we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Oh no, there we go. There is a cat. Come on then.
Go see the whole zoo.
Oh, sorry.
Hold on. There we go. All right. So we are, I think, officially on our 12th one of these because we were skipping over December.
Oh, that's good to know.
So technically a year this time, I guess, if you,
I see where you're going.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good going. Well
Sure.
done, us.
One thing that would be good from folks this evening is, at any point as well, it'd be good if you have ideas on how to make remote meetups probably more engaging, because I know that at the moment with everybody working remotely, it can be quite draining sitting at a machine all day or probably in meetings and so on. And I know that we're doing the same now, but for fun. It can be difficult for folks, and we do want to make it more interesting and engaging as we can. But yeah, we're definitely open to your thoughts and ideas around how we can go about that. Come on, then.
Yes. What he said.
Well, you've got the penguins as a start.
Yeah.
This is true. And Octocat.
Penguin stickers.
That's much better. I'd like a penguin sticker, please.
I want a multi-cat.
Yeah, she's taken to just walking to the room and meowing at me until I pick her up, and then she decides that, thanks, that's all I wanted, I'm going to leave now. There you go.
That's how I get Azure to do things for me. I go up and just stand behind him and complain and watch him do the thing, and then I leave.
Well, surely at that point it would have been easy just to do it yourself.
You would think, wouldn't you? But no. Some things that only he can do. The challenge is to do it virtually.
Yes, yeah.
That's an issue.
That's why you want to get echoes all around your house and then just drop into whatever room he's in.
No, I'm gunning for a remote presence robot.
Yeah.
Yes, they have one at Cap One because I've seen it when I've been to meetups there like years ago, and they don't use it. And I want it, and I just need to know who to ask so that I can get it. I'm working on it.
I mean, presumably at the moment, one remote presence robot isn't enough because it would be the only thing in the office.
No, everyone is in the office.
Not at Cap One.
No, that's true. But in Rebel's office, everyone apart from like me and one of my colleagues,
Oh, right, okay.
but mainly me, are working remotely. Everyone else wanted to go back into the office.
But you do live miles away as well.
70, yes. So I'm not doing that, really.
I didn't realise it was that many.
Oh, 70 or 17?
70. I live in Huddersfield. Well, technically Home First, but no one knows where that is. So I say Huddersfield. And I work in Nottingham. I made the choice to move and didn't tell my employer before I bought the house. It's fine. It worked out fine.
On that
We
note,
don't do that.
speaking of Nottingham, shall we begin?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go with share a portion of the screen. Just making sure that's big enough. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to DevOps Knots September 2020. As always, before we get into anything, I would like to thank our sponsors, Rebel Recruiters, who provide us with the Pro Zoom and in the before time, a physical place for us to do this, and food and that kind of thing. Stickers providing stickers, and if you would like stickers sending to you, just get in touch with us and we can send you a sticker pack out. And for JetBrains for providing our prize for this evening, which is a 12 months subscription to any JetBrains product that you can lay your hands on. If you'd like to have this sort of thing right in your ear holes, every month, Louise, one of our speakers this evening, Misha, myself, Jonathan Ralph, and Pete Gallagher, who also runs a set of meetups in Nottingham, do a podcast every month talking about all things software development, Agile, and DevOps related. In fact, we have a new episode coming out this Friday where we explore the final 4 Agile principles. And to win that JetBrains prize that we're talking about this evening, all you need to do is tweet with the hashtag DevOpsNots, and we'll do a random draw at the end of the evening to see who wins. We are looking for speakers. We're now looking for speakers for November and into 2021. If you're interested in speaking at DevOps Knots, whether or not you're at home looking at YouTube here with us on Zoom, or watching one of the many reruns on YouTube itself, please do get in touch with us at contact@devopsnots.co.uk if you are interested, or contact us on Twitter, which is also at DevOpsNots as well. We look for cultural change, leadership talks. We look at Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, Oracle for the 3 people that use it, that kind of thing. As for tonight, though, we have 2 fantastic speakers lined up. We have Louise Paling, who has spoken at DevOps Knots before. She's a software development manager and one of the co-hosts of the Agile Engineering podcast, as I mentioned, with her talk Change is Hard, but Penguins Make It Easier. And joining us as well is Martyn Coupland, who is a senior technology consultant at Ensono, with his talk on DevSecOps on Microsoft Azure. So without further ado, let's get into it. And we're going to start with Louise this evening. So please give a big DevOps Knots welcome to her, and take it away, Louise.
Hello. My name is Louise Paling. I am going to talk a little bit about managing change, because if there's one thing that you can guarantee with change is that human beings do not like it. So it's always good to think out in advance how you're going to go about doing it. Fortunately, Professor John Kotter has figured this all out for us. He's spent a career working this out and has written a lot of books with a lot of detail and statistics about how to do it. He's also written a couple of books which are a little bit easier to digest. Not quite children's books because they are aimed at adults, but fables. The most famous one will be Our Iceberg is Melting, which some of you may have heard of or read. He's also done a follow-up called That's Not How We Do It Here, which is a similar concept. I'm going to take you through Our Iceberg is Melting today, and then that will take us through the 8 steps in the Kotter change model, and then I'll look at how we can apply those steps to some real-world situations. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing, and this will work. Okay, well, that didn't work. There we go. Nope. Right, we're going to start with an iceberg, which might not be so surprising given the title. This iceberg is home to a colony of penguins. So we have a whole group of penguins who live a nice little life here. They have a lot of traditions in how they do things and how their things are organized. One of our penguins is called Fred. That does not look like, I never said I could draw. Just go with it, pretend that totally looks like a penguin. So we've got a penguin, he's called Fred. And Fred he's quite young, inexperienced, but he is very clever and he's very inquisitive. Some might say nosy. He goes around and he sees things and he wants to figure things out and asks questions. One day while he's wandering around his iceberg, he notices a cave that wasn't there before. So he investigates a bit and he starts looking out and he realizes that actually there's a whole lot of caves and cracks and crevices in his iceberg that definitely didn't used to be there. And he realizes that, yeah, we've got a problem here. In fact, it's so big a problem that our iceberg is melting. Like I said, Fred, he's young, he's not got a whole lot of experience, and he doesn't really know how to deal with this, or can't do a whole lot on his own. So he decides he's going to have to figure out who can help him. And as I'm sure you all know, penguin colonies are run by an organising committee, a group of leaders. In this case, there are 10 of them. So Fred has a think about all of the penguins he knows is on the leadership committee and works out who the most approachable penguin might be, the right person to go and talk to this is. And he decides that the right person in this case is Alice. Alice is a very straightforward kind of penguin. She's quite to the point, but she won't just dismiss things out of hand. She'll definitely listen. So Fred decides Alice is probably a good person to go to this to. And he goes up to her and he explains that, oh dear, our iceberg appears to be melting, which Alice doesn't take particularly well, but she will at least give Fred a chance to explain. And when he does, when he tells her what he's seen, she's an expert in management and in how to lead. She doesn't really know a whole lot about the science, but she lets Fred explain, and he takes her to see these cracks and fissures that he's found. And she realizes that, well, I mean, might not understand it all, but there's definitely something there that needs to be taken on board. So she takes Fred to see the penguin in charge of the leadership group, a penguin called Louise. These penguins are getting worse. I swear they were better in my practice runs. So Louise is the chap in charge. He's very practical. He knows how to take charge. Probably wouldn't listen to Fred on his own, but Alice is stood by him. So he decides he'll listen, and Fred explains what he's found, and Alice backs up the parts that she's seen. Somewhat reluctantly, Louise agrees to give Fred an audience at the next committee meeting. And he goes off. So Fred, he's never presented at this level before. This is quite intimidating, and not helped by the fact that Alice is looking a little bit nervous at this fact. But Alice, she does know what she's doing, so she can help Fred out a bit. She can explain what kind of penguins are going to be there, what sort of personalities. There are some who will want the hard facts. There are some who will fall asleep if they're given the statistics, but tell them a good story and they'll be all over it. There'll be some who will want proof, and there'll be probably some people who won't want to believe. So between them, they come up with a plan. And Fred decides what he's going to do. He's going to build a little mini scale model of the iceberg that he can take to this group. So he takes along his model, he explains what he's found, and he uses the model to show it. So Alice backs up the fact that this is what she's seen in reality. And this way, he doesn't have to take some of the elderly penguins on the same grand tour that he took Alice. He's able to use the model to show. And there are lots of penguins there, and some of them are starting to nod along and understand. Unfortunately, not everyone is nodding along. We have one penguin who is in charge of weather forecasting. This is the penguin who for years has been looking at the science and working out what's going to be happening around the weather. And this penguin is saying that this is rubbish. And every summer the ice melts and every winter it freezes again. And we've been doing this for generations. There's nothing to worry about. This penguin's name, rather appropriately, is No-No. There are a couple of reasons why he got his name. Legend has it that it was his grandfather's name. Others say that that was his first words. It's certainly his favourite word. But he is one of this group of 10 important penguins, and one of them saying that they disagree with this, well, that's just given permission to all of the other penguins to start saying, well, maybe this isn't a problem. Maybe this is just some young penguin trying to make a name for himself or trying to cause trouble where there isn't anything. So things are starting to get a bit disruptive here. Fortunately, our friend Fred, he's a quick thinker. And what he says is, well, let's do an experiment. Let's take a glass bottle, we'll fill it with water, and we'll bury it deep in the ice. And then overnight it'll freeze. And if my theory is right, once it freezes, the water will expand as it becomes ice and it'll crack the glass bottle. So if that happens, then we probably have something to worry about. If it doesn't, okay, fine. Maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. So the penguins agree that, yeah, this is a valid experiment. We should probably try that. And Louis himself, he fills the bottle with the water into the bottle, and they decide that the penguin that they're going to give the bottle to is a penguin called Buddy. Buddy is he's a bit of a laugh. He's not the most hardworking penguin, but he is everybody's friend. Everyone loves Buddy, and therefore he acts as a neutral party to be able to carry out this experiment. So Buddy goes off, he buries the bottle, leaves it overnight, goes off, enjoys the nightlife, has a bit of a party with his friends, comes back the next day to dig up the bottle. And then he comes to the group of 10 and looking a little bit nervous because, exactly as Fred had predicted, the bottle had indeed broken. So for most, this was a clear sign that, yeah, indeed, the iceberg is melting and we need to do something about this. So the first thing that happens is Louis calls an all-hands meeting, an all fins meeting, all flippers meeting. I don't know what it would be in penguins, but he gets everybody around. And he presents the facts. He lets Alice have a bit of a say as well, because she was the first one in the leadership group to have seen this. And everybody now is aware that there is a problem. So everybody realizes that this is an issue. We have a reason to be concerned. There's a sense of urgency has been created here. Unfortunately, nobody knows what they're supposed to do with this. So they're all just a little bit worried at this point. But Louis goes away next and he starts gathering a group to work out what they should be doing. And this is often called the guiding coalition. Or the penguins he decides to put on this are himself, as he is a good leader. He has the trust of most of the penguins. I mean, there might be a few teenagers, and there's certainly No-No who don't necessarily trust him so much, but generally speaking, everybody likes, everyone trusts in Louis' leadership. He puts Alice on because, she's a key part of this. All of the reasons that Fred went to her in the first place. He puts Buddy on as still that neutral third party that everybody trusts, not the brightest penguin, but very trustworthy and everybody's friend. He also appoints Fred to this group because he's young and he wouldn't normally be part of this group, but he has shown clear initiative in identifying the problem and doing something about it. And then the fifth member of the group is a penguin that everyone calls the professor. A professor is your kind of penguin who'll go around spouting facts, just interesting things he's remembered. He's very logical, well thought out person who can take a step back from the day-to-day detail and look at the big picture. Okay, you think I'm bad at drawing penguins? Wait until you see me try and draw a squid. That's totally a squid. Don't question it, just go with it. So the penguin grabs this group of 5. Where's our 5? These are 5. And he gets them together over a meal of squid to discuss the situation. And they realise that the first thing they need to do is work out where they're going to get to next. What is the solution to this problem? So they start talking to other penguins, trying to gather some ideas. There's some interesting ideas out there. One penguin thinks maybe they can get some whale fat and create glue and stick the iceberg together. That's quickly shown to be an ideal solution. Somebody suggests maybe they can move more to the center of Antarctic where the ice is more solid, which sounds like a good idea until somebody points out that they'll be too far away from the sea and won't have anything to eat. Somebody else suggests maybe they can drill a big hole in the middle of the iceberg to let out the pressure. It turns out that would take too long and might actually be the thing that causes the iceberg to fall apart in the first place. So they're starting to run out of ideas when one of the group starts talking to a seagull. I'm not even going to attempt to draw a seagull, we're just going with nice simple bird wings. So talking to this seagull, and it turns out seagulls live in a very different way to penguins. They move from place to place, and the seagull that they're talking to happens to be a scout for his flock. What's the collective noun for seagulls, anyone? His group. And this starts to form an idea. Clearly the penguins aren't going to be flying around, but maybe they can adapt this idea. And they come up with the idea that they could be the world's first nomadic penguin colony. This is not the world's best idea, but it also doesn't have any fatal flaws like all of the other ideas they've got. One thing they know for certain is if they stay put, they're going to have problems. After all, their iceberg is melting. So they decide this is what they're going to do. They are going to become nomadic penguins moving from iceberg to iceberg. So we get another all hands meeting to explain to everybody what's happening. And Louis is quite the inspirational speaker. He explains nicely exactly what's happening. And everybody buys into this, well, generally speaking, because yeah, he's weaving a very, very interesting story here. Explaining, yes, I said before that we had a problem, but we have a solution now. There is a future. And this is very relieving, well, with a few exceptions. Our friend No is not exactly enamored of this plan. So we have a group of penguins who are all listening to this, and they're taking it in different ways. There's a whole group who can see the vision, understand what it is that they're being told, and they are very relieved. There is an answer. Excellent. Somebody's got this in hand. There's another large group of penguins who are just still busy digesting the details. I mean, there's a whole group who are just confused about exactly what on earth's going on. We've then got the group of skeptics who, they're not necessarily against it, but they're not convinced this is the right answer. And then, of course, we have those who are listening to good old no-no. So there are a whole different range of emotions going on here. But generally speaking, people are accepting this concept. And so what happens next is that our group of 5 guiding penguins decide they need to keep pressing this message. They've told everyone, they've done it in a nice, inspirational way. They need to keep that momentum going. So they start a poster campaign. They put posters advertising this new world, this new life everywhere. And they start talking about it a whole lot, and they get people excited. They pull more people in, the people in that group, the people who were relieved and excited and could see this vision. They start pulling some of the ones in who are just sort of still digesting the information. And they end up creating various groups of penguins who can go about and work on this and take on different aspects of it. They end up with about 50 different penguins all helping them out, which is great. They've got, I have no idea how to draw. Okay. There's a lot of excitement. That's an excited penguin. Totally, very clearly, obviously an excited penguin. You can all agree that, right? Yeah, good. Right. So there's a lot of excitement going on, particularly with this whole new role that there is, the scout role. This is something that's never been done before, and there's suddenly like a new future for people. Particularly the younger penguins are very excited by this. Lots of adventure they can see. So this is great. But also, there's a whole subsection of people who are starting to believe that maybe this is all fake news and that it's not quite true. And well, no-no's been whispering in their ears. It's not great. There's also, rather strangely, been a spate of young penguins having nightmares. And then the parents of the children are starting to, not trying to write, there we go, are starting to worry about maybe this isn't a good thing if it's scaring the children. Then, of course, we've got all of the people who decide that the right way to do this is to maybe build a committee to work out what's to happen, and are starting to campaign for taking on the role of head of scouts. And then there's also the well-known thing, which you'll all know about, that penguins don't share food. They'll catch food for themselves or for their children, but obviously they wouldn't share it with anyone else. I mean, you all know this. This is fine. So we've got scouts going off on long sea voyages trying to find icebergs. Well, they don't have time to hunt for their own fish, so how are they going to eat? So slowly but surely, these 50 people, 50 penguins that were involved, they start lowering the numbers and lowering again. And the group of 5 get together and decide that they need to get to the bottom of this, and they need to do something about the problems. Alice goes to investigate what's happening with these nightmares. She wants to find out what these are based on. And what she finds out is that the school teacher has been telling the children stories of killer whales in the seas, and they're all now convinced that anybody who goes swimming is going to get eaten. And unsurprisingly, we find that there's one source of all of the news about the fact that this isn't real and it isn't really happening. So that's all coming from no-no, pretty much at the root. And they decide they need to do something about it. So the first thing that happens is Louise very, very forcefully says, this is not going to happen. We're not doing a new org. We don't need that role. We just want a group of scouts. And then they get the professor, that handy little penguin who has all of those facts in his head. And what they do is they send him out to work closely with no-no. And every time no-no starts spouting off his rubbish facts, the professor's there to do a real-time fact check on him and can start talking about some of the old stories he's heard, interesting anecdotes about the dangers to icebergs of cruise ships, for example. And Alice goes and speaks to the school teacher. She wants to find out, what on earth is this? Why is she telling such horrible stories to the children? It turns out that she's not really doing this on purpose. She's just scared. I mean, this is a whole new way of life. The school teacher is such a valued penguin in the community. She's got all of this knowledge that she teaches. And what the penguins are talking about here is a whole new way of living. And what place has she got in that? She doesn't know any about how to do scouting. She doesn't know anything about moving from iceberg to iceberg. What is she going to do? How does she fit into this world? So Alice talks to her and calms her down. Explains to her that actually she's vitally important in the new world, because teaching and the ability to learn is going to be more important than ever. Everybody's going to be doing new things. No one's going to expect her to just know this. As the penguins learn these new ways, they'll work with her to work out how to teach this to people. And she's going to be really important to passing on these new skills to the rest of the colony. And the teacher starts to understand and starts to feel better and takes it on herself to change the story she's telling. And all of a sudden, instead of telling stories about huge sea monsters, she's instead telling the children stories of superheroes. Which it turns out is exactly the right thing to do. It really captures the imagination of the children. And of course, children being children don't really know what they should and shouldn't be doing. For example, they don't know that they probably shouldn't be walking up to a member of the leadership committee and just starting to talk to them. But young Sally Ann, nobody's told her this, and you know how young children are. They'll just wander up to anybody. And this is what Sally Ann does. She goes up to Alice one day and just and asks her, how can I be a superhero? How can I be a hero and help the colony? What does Alice say? Does she tell her to go away and stop talking to important people? Does she tell her to not worry about it? The adults will take care of it. Well, we know from how she dealt with Fred that that's not really her style. And she understands that everybody can make a difference and everybody should be able to be part of this new way of living that they're trying to create. So what she tells Sally Ann is, the one big problem we still have is, how do we feed the scouts? And if Sally Ann can help convince her parents and the grown-ups that they need to share food, then that would absolutely make Sally Ann a hero. So Sally Ann goes off to school and starts talking with her friends, and they start plotting. Meanwhile, Louis gets the first trial group of scouts and sends them off to start investigating and seeing if they can find some nearby icebergs. Sally Ann and her friends work on their plan, and they decide they're going to create a school fete, which quickly expands to being just a big gathering for the entire colony. They're going to call it the Hero Day, a tribute to heroes. And the cost of admission will be 2 fish. And they time this so that it will coincide with the scouts returning. As any parent knows, when your kid is organising something with the school, you don't really have a choice, you just have to go. And then, as more and more people are being roped in, well, it turns out peer pressure works just as well on penguins as it does on humans. And before you know it, the entire colony is going to turn up to this, each of them bringing 2 fish. Even No turns up, although obviously he's talking about how the scouts are going to come back starved, or they'll be eaten by monsters on their way, and how it's all going to be disastrous. But he is still turning up. And the scouts do turn up. come back, and they come back telling exciting tales of their adventures. And they're talking about the sea and swimming, and they're talking about the icebergs they found. They haven't found any icebergs that are any better than the one they've got. But what they have done is proven that they can get out, they can investigate other icebergs, and they can return. And thanks to Sally Ann, they have food to eat when they come back exhausted. And which is the right colour? Let's go with that one. And each of the scouts is handed a medal, heralding them as heroes of the colony. Well, I mean, this goes down well, and all of a sudden, everybody wants to be a scout because, you know, who doesn't want to be a hero? And exciting tales of adventure. It's wonderful. Plus, at the end of the day, Alice stands up and asks Sally Ann to come up and hands one last hero medal to young Sally Ann, who is at this point in tears, but also a lot of the other penguins who aren't so interested in going out into the wild seas and braving the dangers that may or may not be there. They're starting to look and wonder, how can this young child be a hero? And when they realise that she's done this by organising things back on the iceberg, start to think, well, how do I get involved? How can I help? How can I be a hero? So now we've got all of these scouts all ready to go out, all of them who need feeding, but by now sharing food has become normal. So we have scouts going out in all directions looking for new icebergs, suitable icebergs. And one day a group do come back and they tell tales of an iceberg that should work for them. It's got a nice big ice wall to protect their eggs from the winds. It's got good fishing grounds. It's also got little mini icebergs along the way so that the young and the old have got plenty of places to stop on the travels there. All of the other scouts come back and nobody's found an iceberg as good as this. So they decide that's it. They need to organize everybody to work out how they're going to move. To get together, they get people into groups to look after each other. Everybody packs, everybody works out what they're going to do. You've got tag teams to make sure that nobody gets left behind or gets lost in the sea. And pretty soon, moving day arrives. Penguins totally move from iceberg to iceberg in a moving van. It's just a thing. Everybody gets off on their way. Why are you laughing at me, Misha? And they move to their new home. And there are some penguins who say, right, that's it, right? We've just found a new iceberg. Great, everything's done. Let's stop. Well, that's great, but what happens if this iceberg has problems? It's not going to be perfect forever. There's still going to be issues. And this isn't the dream, right? The vision was to become nomadic penguins. So we send out the scouts. I really can't draw binoculars either, can I? I don't know why I thought it was a good idea to draw. I can't draw. But hey, I should have just done some screenshots or something. So we've got the scouts. They go off in lots of different directions. They're all looking for icebergs. And they identify the next iceberg they should go to, one that's better than the one they're at, that works well for the next season. And yet again, they all move. And before you know it, this tribe of nomadic penguins, well, it's just how they work. This is the new normal. This is what they do. Most people have just accepted it. Oh, this is the way of life now. I mean, there are a few who think that actually there's a few more modern things they should be doing with this and different techniques they can bring. There are some who still tell stories about the old days and how it was so much better. You're never going to be able to please everyone. But we have, at the end of this, come up with a whole new way of working, a new way of living. If I can get that all on screen, excellent. And this nice little fable illustrates Kotter's steps for change. So, number 1, create a sense of urgency. Write neatly and fast, and pick one. So we have a melting iceberg. That's clearly number 1. And we've also got a little bottle that cracked that tells us also this is not great. Number 2, pull together your guiding team. Also often called the guiding coalition. Well, that was our group of 5. A good cross-section of skills and personalities. Make sure you've got the right people in that group to be able to identify what you need to do, because that is what needs to happen next. You need to develop the change vision and the strategy. In our case, obviously that is becoming nomadic penguins. Where's that? There, 3. Number 4, all about the communication. Everything always comes back to communication. In this case, the purpose of the communication is to communicate for understanding and also for buy-in. People need to believe in this change. They need to really believe that that sense of urgency from step 1 and the strategy and the vision for the future from step 3 are a good solution. They don't necessarily need to believe it's the right solution, but they need to believe it's the one that everyone's going to get behind. And in this case, obviously, we had that all hands, but we also had the poster campaign, and we had Louise very clearly explaining the org structure. And we had Alice talking to the teacher about how important her role was going to be. Step 5 is to empower others to act. The team of 5 can't do this alone. The team of 10 leaders can't do this alone. Everybody needs to be able to actually act without running through a committee constantly, be able to do this on their own. So this is the teacher feeling she was able to tell the right stories. This is Sally Ann believing that she, as a child, could even play a part in this, and Alice giving her the permission to go ahead and organize things. Step 6 is to produce short-term wins. This is the one I often struggle with. We often hear about short-term wins, and I often feel it's a little bit disingenuous. It feels like you're trying to trick people into believing something because, oh, we're just going to throw some quick things in and make it look like it's really good. And there's a certain amount of that to show people that it can be successful. But it's also a little bit of sort of hypothesis-driven development. It's a little bit of proving to yourself that this can work. So in this case, our step 6 was that small team of scouts to go ahead. They didn't find the perfect iceberg, but they proved that looking for icebergs was a viable solution, that this would work. And without doing that quickly, the whole thing might have fallen apart. Step 7. Don't let up. Keep going. It can be very, very tempting to stop. When you're looking at moving, easy to convince yourself maybe it wasn't such a big thing. This is a huge change to how we're working. We need to carry on. And once you've moved to your new home, to say, well, actually, this is enough. This first step is enough. We don't need to keep on. And then finally, step 8 is to create a new culture, which I'm assuming you're going to be able to guess is our final step along the journey there to creating some nomadic penguin tribe. Colony. The good news is that this doesn't just work for penguins. That it absolutely works for software companies as well. any company, actually. John Kotter is not somebody who works in technology, he works in business. So these are steps that all businesses, when they're introducing change of any kind, can look at. I've implemented Agile changes, DevOps transformations, but it can also apply to if you're looking at taking on new technologies, maybe moving to a new language, maybe moving from an on-prem solution to a cloud solution. So I'm going to give some examples of how this can work. So talking about moving, let's take a DevOps transformation and a cloud migration as a couple of examples. So step one, creating a sense of urgency. If you're looking to move to DevOps, then maybe what we need to be telling people is how much market share we're losing and that we need to move quicker because at the moment our quarterly releases are just not keeping up with the competition, and it's going to customers are choosing other providers. We can't move to the cloud. This is an interesting one. Your creative sense of urgency, you often think of it as your melting iceberg, your burning platform, but it actually could be instead an exciting look to the future. So maybe you're the leader in the UK, you've written the best software, and your sense of urgency is actually now you want to be the best in the world. It's not necessarily something you're doing wrong now. So maybe our cloud thing isn't about how bad we're doing, but it's about increasing market share. Maybe we are doing very well, but if we go to the cloud, we can beat the competition. We can do things faster. We can spin up more instances. We'll be able to sort of do a replication of what we've got much faster. So step two, pulling together our guiding team. For our DevOps example, you're going to want a team that is a cross-section of your organization, because DevOps, it's a terrible name. It's not just Dev and Ops. You want to pull in people from anybody who's going to be involved. So you definitely want Dev and you definitely want Ops. You probably also want some management. You want some people who will be doing the implementation. You want some people who are good at automation. You want your process people involved. Maybe you need to involve some finance people, because you might be looking at how things, different ways of funding things. And for our cloud migration, you probably want a more focused techie team, but you'll still want to be somewhat cross-functional there. So you maybe want to talk to sales, perhaps, because are we going to be selling this to customers differently? You possibly want finance there as well, because you're going to be going from a CapEx to OpEx model. Step three, what is our change vision and strategy for these different things? Well, for DevOps, I'd say you're probably going to be wanting to look at the org structure. What is the new future going to look like? How are the processes people are going to using are going to change? Who's going to be on call in the new world? How much automation are we talking about here? Are we talking about retraining, or are we talking about redundancies? I mean, preferably go with the retraining if you can. It's cheaper to retrain people than it is to teach people about your domain, but this is your change program. You can choose your own vision. And for your cloud migration, then again, there's probably going to be some retraining, but it's more the new technologies you're looking at there. What timeline are we looking at? What steps are we going to be taking to move to the cloud? Are we going to be using an IaaS or a PaaS platform? Is there some sort of strangler pattern we can be using to start moving things to the new way of working? Then we need to communicate this. So what understanding and buy-in do we communicate here, and how do we do it? For DevOps, I talk to the groups. We've got our guiding team. So I talk to the groups, or the people who are involved in that guiding team. So if you talk to your dev group, you talk to your ops group, and you talk to the people who will be most directly involved. And then I'd say, get everybody together and talk to the organization as a whole. Call an all hands. For the cloud migration, you're probably going to want to communicate more at the ground level. It's going to be more around the technologies that you're going to be talking about. But you might also want to talk to your customers. Maybe you want a press release because you're going to be able to open up whole new markets or sell things in a different way. So your communication there isn't necessarily just internally. Step 5, we're going to empower other people. So what's the right way to empower people? For DevOps, maybe you ask people to look at automating your processes. Maybe you get people to pick what tools are the best for them. Get people to choose how the teams interact with each other. Let them make the decisions and talk to each other. If you've had strict silos before, give people the power to just wander across the office and talk to other people, or, you know, nowadays, open up a Teams call to somebody. And for the cloud migration, what kind of empowering can you suggest there? How can is choose your own tech an option for your teams? What about the methodologies they're using? Can different teams choose different timescales? Will Scrum work for one team and Kanban for another? Is that something that you can empower them to pick what works best for them? Step 6, short-term wins. What are the right short-term things? For DevOps transformations, I found the most visible, simple things are to look at how do you change your processes, and can you get some good, strong automation in there early. So your processes might be around the team organizations and introducing stand-ups that go across different functions. For cloud migration, how about you leave everything on-prem, but you pick one service that you can create in the cloud that your on-prem things can call into. So you create something new in the cloud that you prove then that your company can operate in that space. And number 7, not letting up. Probably for both of them, but definitely for the DevOps transformation, automate all the things. Just every time you've automated something, what's the next thing you can automate? And people are key to your DevOps transformation. So constantly pull more people in. Who else can get involved in this? How can you change that? With the cloud, it really is just about pushing more things to the cloud. How can you get the next thing to be in there? And finally, step 8, what is the new culture for each of these? How will you know that you've got to where you want to be? Because anybody who tries to sell you a transformation thing will always tell you it's not a destination, it's a journey. But at some point, you know you've got somewhere towards that vision you came up with. So I think for me, for a DevOps transformation, when you have all of the people just automatically working together without questioning it, you know you've got a new culture. You might not be exactly where you want to be. There might be a whole load of new tools you want to adopt. There might be more processes you want to put in place. There might be loads more things you want to automate. But once you've got the people working together and not questioning that they're working across what used to be hard silos, then you know you've got that new DevOps culture in place. And your on-prem to cloud migration, when people are thinking about cloud first for any new solution, or when they're looking to update existing ones and they're automatically talking about how they deal with the cloud, I think that's the point that you know that vision of moving to the cloud is a thing that it has taken root with your teams. So that's my terrible drawings of how change management can work. It is an abbreviated version. I've left out a load of detail about the story, so I do recommend Our Iceberg is Melting. Unfortunately, I did lend my physical copy to someone, and as you all know, if you lend a book to someone, never expect it back, but I have got it on ebook. I also can't draw meerkats, otherwise I might have done the follow-on, which is that's not how we do things here, which is slightly more, it's really good for if you work in a large company and are trying to figure out how you get new process and change in. That's a really nice way of talking about it. So I highly recommend reading those books. Does anyone have any questions for me?
We have a question on the chat from James D. How about DevOps transformations involving compliance teams in heavily regulated environments like medical or healthcare, for example, or paper or document-based processes? What levers might work for them using this approach?
So, I mean, I say that DevOps is a misnomer. One of the people who ought to be in that is absolutely a compliance team. So anyone who knows about the processes, they need to be massively involved in changing this. They should be on your guiding team. I have worked in places where we've had very strict gates we've needed. I've had ISO 9001 compliance and worked out how we can do Agile with that. A lot of it, when you get to the stricter regulations, are around separation of interests. So if you have your developers also being the ones who are looking after production, how do you make sure that you've got the right separation of concerns and developers can't just jump onto production anytime they feel like it? So there are definitely ways to do that. Automation is your friend here. The ideal I think is that nobody has access to production automatically. You can maybe give people elevated privileges, at which point everything they do is thoroughly logged, you know what they've done, what they've looked at. But the ideal is, rather than logging onto production and doing something, any change you want to make to production, you make in code, and that gets pushed through as normal. Even if it's an emergency change, update a script and have the script make the changes.
Is that
Excellent.
when you talk about updating the script, you mean also follow processes like pull requests for those scripts and have it move through the pipeline, so you have that sort of 4 eyes approach to it as well?
Yes, you'd still have your normal review of any change that you're making there. You might in certain circumstances, if everything's down and no one can get hold of you, might have a way to override that. But again, all of that would be fully logged, and you'd know that had happened, and the first opportunity it would be double, triple checked. But again, that's part of your vision about how you want to operate.
Okay, cool. Any more questions for Louise, folks? Cool. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Louise. A huge round of applause for her artistic impression of penguins.
I apologise for how bad my drawing is.
I think they were great.
When the follow-up courses on how to draw them.
Yeah, they were lovely. I very much enjoyed that. That is the best talk I've ever seen. Your Lego one is amazing, but that one, it's got penguins. It's great.
Chris, how are your drawing skills?
Wow,
I just learned to do.
Mine make my daughter cry.
Oh, that's sad.
So it's 25 to 8 now. Should we take a quick 5-minute comfort break following that? And then right after that, should we say 22? We'll pick up with Martyn and his talk on DevSecOps on Microsoft Azure.
Yeah, see you all soon.
Right, it's worth noting for the folks both on Zoom and YouTube, just as a reminder that if you tweet with hashtag DevOpsNots this evening, you can win a JetBrains license for 12 months for any product that they make. And even when that license runs out, if you choose not to renew it, you can get the previous version of the product for free forever.
Ooh. You should tweet.
Interestingly, at the same time, at the moment, there is talk going on at the DevOps Enterprise Summit for Las Vegas. And I've had that over to one side, keeping track of it, because there are some really interesting conversations happening. There's a couple of questions there that I think I'd like to pose to everybody here. One of them seems quite a tough one as well. Is how do you prove or show the return on investment of transformation work to finance teams, and how do you get them on board? I don't think they're necessarily going to be completely open to the Kotter steps.
Isn't that kind of massive where the small wins come in? You kind of prove that there is a benefit and a return and build it up.
Potentially, but if they're looking longer term, though, they might be looking the next 12 months of budget, for example. What can we show them in terms of small wins, especially if we don't know? I mean, cultural change is not, to me, it's not something you can measure in a ROI format, I guess. So how do you get them to sign off on budget for initiatives and that kind of thing?
I think if they've had a history of cost overruns and budgets being blown, then they might be amenable to any well-framed idea. So that might help.
True. Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I guess there is the impact as well. If we drop down to raw tooling-based things, proving the return on investment to go from capex to opex as well. When you migrate things into, say, Azure or AWS or whatever, that's not necessarily going to instigate your cultural change, but potentially help to enable it by giving that elasticity.
Actually, I was thinking about it. I would reiterate the quick wins thing. If you find out there's a report they've been asking for over a year, and you give it to them within the space of a month, they soon start supporting you quite eagerly.
That is a very good point, and that's on that's what I've seen happen.
So limiting the number of things you do can help. So where you have got 50 different people asking for things and you're just never getting around to doing any of them, telling people, no, I'm not doing that quickly, can have a surprisingly positive effect. And just being able to explain that I'd like to be able to help you, but these other things are a higher business priority, and that's what we're going to do. And then focusing on smaller things so you can get them quickly. But actually saying no to somebody fast can be a really positive outcome.
Yeah, true. Well, I guess when you say saying no to somebody fast, though, what I mean, that no is almost the easiest answer, I guess, compared to yes.
Depends who you're saying no to.
Well, you know me, it's everybody. So.
I think ignoring things are the great. I loved a company that used to work. They have the ritual. So every year they clear down any bug that's more than 2 years old, which is just a bit daft.
Yeah, I've seen that done. It's well, if it's been there for 2 years, we're clearly not going to fix it. So why it's the same idea of clearing down your backlog regularly? It's just extra noise for things that are never going to be solved. I think closing them is maybe not the right answer. Maybe moving them somewhere under a will not fix. So that you're aware that it's a bug, but that you've made the decision that it's not going to be fixed is a better way of doing that. Stops it just being constantly re-raised by people.
That makes sense, yeah. So, guys, well, it is, in fact, just got on 20 to 8. Martyn, if you're ready, let's...
I am.
Good. In fact, very quickly, you might not be able to share anything if I don't make you a host, so let's just change that very quickly.
Please. There we go. Perfect.
So, everybody, please welcome Martyn Coupland and his talk on DevSecOps.
Perfect. Thanks, Liam. So yeah, thanks everyone for having me. As you can tell from the accent, I'm definitely from the north of the UK. Although I don't live there anymore. That is originally where I'm from, and annoyingly to a lot of my colleagues, I haven't lost my accent. So, although I think that's quite a good thing. So, we're going to be talking about DevSecOps in a couple of different ways today. So first of all, I want to talk about some of the theory of DevSecOps. It's really important to understand why we actually do this rather than just dive straight into this is how you do it on a specific platform. It's really important to understand that. The Mexican's pretty similar to what you would hear on any cloud platform, to be honest, when it comes to that. We shouldn't really be doing anything different at that level when it comes to AWS, Azure, GCP, or IBM Cloud, if anyone uses IBM Cloud. But it is important, like I say, to not only understand why we enable this tooling, what are we actually trying to achieve. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well, and then we'll go into how to do this end-to-end, basically, with all native tool into the platform. You need no third-party tools to enable a good DevSecOps story on Azure. So I'll go into that. So little tiny bit about me. So I work as a senior technical consultant for Ensono. And they're a managed service provider headquartered out of Chicago in the United States. And what my role is there is fundamentally I work with clients around DevOps transformation and also on the technical side of things from a Microsoft Azure perspective. I design, implement, and work with numerous different solutions when it comes to Azure as a platform. So I normally work outside of infrastructure services. So my background is software engineering and software development. So I work with a lot of the cloud native services and web apps and mobile apps, APIs, and those sorts of services. So let's get going. Okay, so first of all, like I said, I want to talk about the theory of DevSecOps and what the core concepts of DevSecOps are really. So first and foremost, I think it's really important to acknowledge that the concept of shifting left is really what this is all about. If I'm being completely honest, I actually don't like the word sec in the middle of DevSecOps. The security is actually something so fundamental to IT and has been for a number of years. Personally, I think we should be doing it anyway. Why is it now a big thing? So I think there's a couple of schools of thought to this. I think there are a lot of people that think that because of the introduction of DevOps into mainstream technology, it's obviously been part of software engineering for quite some time as we've started to bleed across and more has become involved. There are quite a number of people that think that we've forgotten how to do very basic things when it comes to security. I'm actually personally not of that opinion. I actually think it's more basic than that, and that is that when you add security into the DevOps principles that you already have, you enable a whole load more value than you previously would have done. I think it still comes back to the basics when it comes to DevOps, which is about value. So two schools of thought, pretty extreme from each other, if I'm honest, but that's kind of where I sit as well. So it's about building confidence in your supply chain. So security is a huge thing in today's technical world. So whether you are in an organization that is a technology company or not, you are fundamentally, your organization is most likely under attack from someone to be able to steal whatever secrets or intellectual property you have. Now, interestingly enough, there's a couple of ways to think about the security aspect here, and this is why I think security should just be added to this from a value perspective, and we include InfoSec into what it is that we already do very well if you're practicing DevOps. And that is that, if you think back to the movies, All of the movies in Hollywood would have you believe that every hacking attempt is basically Tom Cruise rappelling down a building and smashing through windows to steal whatever it is that your organization holds. But fundamentally, it's a lot simpler than that. It's about the basics. If you look at some of the biggest information security breaches in recent time, it's actually systems that are unpatched. It's passwords that are not changed from defaults. It's us, it's humans. And these are basic things that need to be protected. It's about endpoint devices. It's about all of these basics. And these are the things that we need to protect against. And adding, you can hopefully already see that when we talk about those basic things and some of the things that we do in DevOps around collaboration and communication means that we can end up adding a lot of value to the security supply chain in your organization if we start to include them in the product-based conversations. And it's all about making sure that not only are we confident that what goes out the door through this process of pipelines and the investment in culture, people and process and the technology, it's not just about making sure that that's quality from a functional perspective, it's around making sure that there's quality from a security perspective as well. So that means making sure that we scan for vulnerabilities, making sure we scan for static resources such as usernames, passwords, connection strings, all of these things. So it's also about things like delivering on a secure platform. All of this has to sit somewhere. So in the cloud, be that whatever cloud provider that is, it's around making sure that the platform that your product sits on is also secure. And it's around managing the access control that sits around that as well. So it's very important to understand what those core concepts are. So when it comes to DevOps and security, it's quite an interesting concept. In most organizations, you could follow a basic ratio that's about to come up on the screen. So that is that for every 100 developers or 100 operations engineers you have, you will then have 10 of the opposite. So if you have 100 developers, you may have 10 operations people or vice versa, and you will have one security person. And that one security person that is good at what they do and is able to keep up with the technology, because don't forget, these are often not infrastructure engineers, they're not DevOps engineers, they're not programmers, they're trained in information security. So they're specialists at what they do, but not the periphery technology that we know as engineers. That one person is really hard to find. So when we hear about the concept of security being everyone's responsibility, in that scenario, that basically means that we're looking for 111 people in this scenario using these numbers to be basically responsible for looking at the security of our product and our platform and having the wherewithal and the confidence to be able to speak up and say something is not quite right and being able to report and act on that. So regardless of technology, how do you actually go off and start doing this within your organization? So I talk about this slide quite a bit to customers. It's also the slide that we use internally, and it's also the slide that I used internally at my previous company as well. So first of all, the slightly green areas there are actually functions within a team. So we're not saying that these have to be physically separate teams, although they could be in much larger organizations. They could also be one team. It could also be 4 people and one person doing each of these roles in much smaller organizations. But regardless of that, the roles fundamentally are security engineering, where within there you have the ability to, as it says at the bottom, experiment with data that is out on the internet from your peers in the information security world, and from the white hat hacker community, and from community-based intelligence about your product. Being able to experiment, then automate some of the testing on top of that, and making sure that whatever you need to protect against can have a test against it to say yes or no, this is secure or this isn't secure. One of the most common roles that most organizations have nowadays in some form or other is security operations. So your SOC, in another way of putting it. So the job of the SOC is fundamentally to hunt, detect, and contain any threats against your organization. So again, whether they come from internal, whether they come from external, regardless of what vector they come through, regardless of how that is executed, they are responsible for basically looking for breaches, what constitutes a breach, being able to monitor and detect when they happen. And if they do happen, being able to contain them into one place. And there's lots of different things that you can do to contain that into one place. It's all around what your organization does and what is the best way to protect your application. Compliance operations is the other one. So compliance operations is gaining a fair amount of momentum these days. And one of the biggest reasons for this is the bigger focus on compliance. So GDPR has put a big focus on this. One of the requirements of GDPR and ISO 27001 is a company's ability to provide evidence that everyone at that organization has undergone some kind of awareness training and knows what to do when something happens. They know who to call, and they know who to speak to, and they know what information they need to tell people. And also they know how to protect themselves as well. So they know what their responsibilities are as an employee of that company to protect that organization from any security breaches. And then lastly, but by no means least, is quite an advanced one, and this is something that you won't find in many organizations, but this is around security science. So this is around things like machine learning and artificial intelligence. This is around being able to take all of the data that all of these teams are producing, looking at data on the internet about the tools you use and the CVEs that are raised against those tools that you use, to be able to put into models, to be able to learn them into more detail, to be able to then measure exactly what's happening and forecast when you may have issues or when you may need to take preventative action. This can come in the form, quite simply, of chances are, if you work for an e-commerce company, when you have a sale on, your platform may be under more attack than at normal times. And the intelligence you can put in from web traffic analysis, that you can put in from network traffic analysis, so the communication between the resources to find out what's happening, will let you then add all that information together. It will let you learn, it will let you then measure what's happening, and you will be able to forecast so you can hunt, detect, and contain more effectively. It's quite an advanced thing to be doing, but there are a number of organizations starting to do that and do that very, very well. So fundamentally, what this comes down to from a developer perspective, what happens when bugs are reported, right? So it's no good as developers as having, you know, absolutely millions of or even billions in some scenarios, logs or lines of data to look through and determine what is, you know, what is a problem, what isn't a problem, and filter it through from there. We need to get what we call high fidelity feedback, and high fidelity feedback is really the key to make sure that bugs which are actually a problem based on the information the previous teams have exposed gets fixed quickly and closes up any holes that are within your business. So within any organization, so you may not get billions of records of data. I work with some enterprises that get 4 to 5 billion events a day from numerous different sources. So whether they're security researchers for some large organizations, so if you targeted this a software organization, be that an AWS, a Microsoft, or a Google, or any of the larger organizations, they have bug bounty programs. They have logs and events, and all of their systems have been generated. They have artificial intelligence reporting in data into one place. They have threat intelligence. They have tooling providing the same level of detail. And they have penetration testers. They have the security red team. And they also have researchers all piling in useful information on specific parts of the application which may or may not have a problem that needs to be looked at. So how do we get all of that information into something tangible that our developers can actually work on? So to be able to get those billions down to millions, we need to be looking at event correlation. What event correlation means fundamentally is being able to take multiple events from the same trigger and wrap them up into one object. So this is finding the first event for a specific module, for instance, within a piece of code or within an application that has triggered a problem, and then any subsequent data that is related, bundling that into the same event. So that can quite quickly get you down from billions into millions. Going further down into the thousands, we start looking at things like case management. So case management is the ability to look using workflows and using pipelines. Is this actually a problem? Let's apply some intelligence to the data we found. Is it a false positive? Is it something that needs further investigation? Can it be dealt with by the information security team, or does it need to go to the developers? So this is where we start to filter using workflows and automation. What needs to go where and what needs to be dealt with in what priority. And out the back of there, we can change the priority of some of those things. So if you think ServiceNow tickets, we can raise or reduce the priority based on the workflow that's running in the background. And then finally, into the hundreds, which is actually what goes onto the developer's backlog. Or if you're very lucky, this is actually the tens more than anything. What you need to be doing here is getting this down to a manageable number so that your developers have real actionable defects that they are able to go off and say, I know if I do not fix this problem, my company is at a really high risk of being exploited. And that means that we lose money. It means that the reputation of the company goes down. It means we have to report lost data to the relevant authorities and all of these things that then trigger off. There's some useful information out on various reports and presentations at the minute about the average cost of a security breach before any fines are levied on top of organisations. And over the last 2 years, that was more than £10 million in the UK. Most organisations simply cannot afford to pay that. So for the majority, for about 80% of organisations in the UK, that fundamentally means bankruptcy if you're the result of a data breach. Not to mention the loss of reputation. People won't want to use your product anymore because it's seen as not secure. Not to mention the fines that may be levied on top of there and all of these other things. So it's really, really important that security is taken very seriously. Okay, so how do we then start to take some of the things that we've talked about there and technically, how do we actually do this? How do we go about enabling some of the technology within Microsoft Azure as a platform to be able to do some of this for us and able to filter out some of the things that we talked about right at the top, provide alerts, do automatic scanning. So the workflow here is pretty simple. So you'll notice there's a number of different tools on here, and each of these is fundamentally a step through, all the way providing something very specific along the way, but they are all part of a chain of events. So first of all, security has to start with the code, right? If we're taking all required steps along the way, all the way through this, and you'll see some of the other steps in a minute that make this a highly secure environment. One of the weakest points you have is actually your code repository and your developers, who has access to be able to commit code into that repository. I've worked with an organization about 2 years ago now. This was their problem. They had holes in their software because of who had access to their source code, and because they were running automatic builds and automatic deployments. Great, they were very mature when it came to DevOps. They weren't very mature when it came to security. So there were holes being punched through applications because stuff was being picked up and it was being thrown straight out into environments, running past unit tests, running past functional tests and user tests, but no security tests. And that meant that when that code got into production and was then scanned by a number of vulnerability tools, it lit up like a Christmas tree, and there was all kinds of stuff all over the place saying, this is a problem, this is a problem. If you don't fix this, there's SQL injection risks here. All of these kind of things will go in up on a dashboard. So start with securing your code, right? So GitHub specifically has a number of great features. So GitHub Advanced Security, the feature is actually called CodeQL. Things like Dependabot to be able to identify and then remediate any issues with dependencies, such as out-of-date versions, enabling the automatic updates of those as well, and the ability to perform automatic secret scanning when you commit code to a repository. That will then pick up any secrets and any connection strings that are still within the code when you do a commit, and that commit will be paused. And depending on a policy that you set up with on that branch, it will then throw it into review for someone else to look at, or it will deny the commit to the repository. So the developer has to go off and then fix that. And how they fix that comes up a little bit further on. So next is around Azure pipelines within Azure DevOps. So Azure pipelines give us the ability to be able to go off. So in this example, I'm using containers. We can build our container images with 100% traceability. We can pick up all of the work items that have been created in Azure boards within Azure DevOps. All of the work items that tell the developers what work they are doing in their specific sprints, what builds have been executed, what commits have been created, and what artifacts have been created for every single image, and they'll be bundled up into one release record. So you can go in and you can look at every execution and see exactly what is included within that specific run of the pipeline. So it gives you the ability fundamentally to be able to see straight away what's in there and who put it in there, and what lines of code have changed from the previous time it was executed. So that's quite a powerful feature that lets you, fundamentally see all of that stuff together and be able to really give you some real quality insights into, if something doesn't look right, this is the place that you'll be able to see it right up front. And there are things that we can automatically do within there using quality gates to be able to pause those pipelines and say, this don't look right, can someone go manually review this? Or can we raise something to the information security team, or whatever that action might be? Okay, so container image scanning as well for vulnerabilities. So when you upload your image as part of the pipeline to the Azure Container Registry, there is integration with Azure Security Center out of the box. The functionality provided here is free. You don't pay an additional amount for this. You can apply a higher tier of service for a nominal fee to scan and check for extra things. But using a built-in Qualys engine, Azure Security Center will automatically go off and scan your containers for any known vulnerabilities, and it will stop that container from being deployed until it's been verified and checked, and then you can override it if you need be. But fundamentally, that's a really good place for you to be able to check what has been built for any vulnerabilities. Then on top of there, this comes back to platforms. You remember earlier on, we were talking about a secure platform. So being able to deploy directly from your pipeline, utilizing infrastructure as code solutions and Azure policy to ensure compliance against what you have set the platform out to do at the beginning, is a really key part of Azure as a platform. It integrates in with Azure Active Directory or your on-premise Active Directory, so you can apply permissions centrally via group-based credentials using your standard domain account. So going back to some of the things that Louise was saying in answer to the question that she answered around developers not having access to production environments, using all of this tool in here, we can enable developers to push code out to various environments all the way through promotion up to production without them having any access to any platform other than the end application that's been deployed, or the Kubernetes instance if that's what they need access to verify config and modify app config. All of those things can be done very easily in minutes upon Azure as a platform. And Azure policy gives you that comfort blanket to know that what you have defined in the outset. So I don't want resources deploying to anywhere outside of the UK for data residency reasons. I don't want expensive SKUs of resources being deployed because they'll cost too much. I want HTTPS to be enabled by default on all ingress controllers on my Kubernetes cluster. All of these different policies that make up your infrastructure config can all be added into Azure policy, and they can be monitored for compliance. You can then, if you want to, say, right, once this has changed, I want to reset it back to what the policy tells me to. And if need be, you can block people from doing stuff on the platform if this is a regular occurrence. There's lots of things you can do with Azure policy, but everything integrated together pulls up quite a powerful story when it comes to running secure code and secure applications. So remember, we talked about secrets a few minutes ago. So secrets from an Azure perspective, be those keys, certificates, tokens, connection strings, and any other type of secret. They can all live within Azure Key Vault. Azure Key Vault is a HSM-backed a vault which gives you access to store and manage those secrets and credentials. You can do password rotation in Key Vault as well automatically. You can integrate that password rotation with various different systems as well, so that the system itself has its password updated and then stored back into Key Vault. And then from an application perspective, you add the relevant library into whatever language you're developing in. And then you can basically reference the secret name from within your code. So you can reference your database connection string without knowing anything else about it, without having access to it, but your application has access to pull the Key Vault to be able to pull the secret down at runtime when it needs it. It's much safer than including them in code. And it also means that regardless of what the secret is, all the way from anything really simple from token wise all the way up to secrets to access an API that stores really sensitive data, your developers don't need to know what those credentials are. They can literally reference them by name, and the application will pull them down and use those secrets when needed. So authentication, big part of what you do when it comes to a lot of Microsoft products. So Active Directory, as we were just saying a few minutes ago, is the forefront of that. So using some of the advanced features like MFA, impossible activity reporting, which is really good when you're logging into a UK VPN from the United States, and it says 1700 hours you logged in from a Chicago IP address, you log onto the VPN, and then log in again. It says you're trying to log in from Staines upon Thames 2 minutes later in the UK. It will block that login because it knows that you can't physically make that journey in that amount of time. It will make you do things based on your config. So it will either deny the login or it will force you to re-MFA your account. If your password is in a dictionary or is quite a simple password and it is compromised in some way, if your password is guessed incorrectly 2 times, you can configure this, but by default, after the second time, on the third time, if that password attempt is then correct, even if you don't have MFA turned on, it will force that login to MFA on your account. So you will get a notification to say, actually, you need to check this. If it's you, fine, go ahead. If it's not you, you can report it as fraud, and it will block that IP address, and it will surface a lot of reporting in Azure SIEM solution, which is Azure Sentinel. You can do whatever you want with it from there. There's a whole host of other great features in Azure AD. It's an OAuth-based platform, so it has the ability to create clients within there for your applications, so your applications can authenticate against Azure AD. And this is exactly how your applications then log into things like Key Vault and other Azure resources. One of the great things about Key Vault is that even as a global admin, so you could be a domain admin ultimately, but if you don't have a specific access policy defined in Key Vault, you do not have access to any secrets within there, regardless of your overall rights within the domain or the subscription in Azure. So it's very, very granular and very easy to be able to configure that to allow applications to access, but not users themselves. So it's very, very powerful. Okay, so all of this is great, but there's an old adage in security, which is, protect against the things you know, monitor for the things you don't know. And this is where monitoring and telemetry comes in. So all of this is great, but without the ability to use a tool like Azure Monitor or Azure Application Insights, which is code level analytics, without the ability to monitor your applications and your infrastructure in some form of real time, you are basically running blind. You don't know if what you're doing is working. So when it comes to adding quality gates in, we can add quality gates in based on the monitoring data. We can release an application, and if we all of a sudden get 100% 404s or whatever, if it's a web application, 500 internal server errors, we can trigger an automatic rollback based on that event data. So we can go back to the last known good deployment. Think of it a little bit like when your Windows device used to blue screen and it used to ask you if you wanted the last known good configuration. This is kind of what that's like, except this works as opposed to the Windows variant, which has never worked as far as I'm concerned. But this is really good because this is your last line of defense, right, from a coding perspective. If there is something you're testing or your developers did not pick up, then this is the last line of defense. This is really critical as far as I'm concerned, above most of the other things in here. If you have a critical application that needs to be highly available, then this is a way to make sure that your application has as close to zero downtime as possible. Even if your release causes issues, your monitoring should pick up that there's issues and tell the pipeline to roll back to the last known good deployment, and it will redeploy the artifacts that were built in the last build and deploy them out to AKS again, and everything will be hunky-dory. And then what happens from there is all of that data about what failed, what was built, what pipeline was run, was then logged in a bug in a work item in Azure DevOps for developers to then pick up and look at. So there's a nice complete journey. And going back to the previous slide where we talked about high fidelity feedback, that is exactly what this is providing. This is narrowing down from the top, from the code level, all the way through the infrastructure and application, all the way to the end, and then sending directly back to the developers exactly what the problem is and where it is and what happened when they deployed it. And that gives them the information they need to go off and then fix it permanently so it doesn't happen again. Okay, so just to, excuse me, just to start to summarize some of this then. So I got some stats from a few teams that I'm working with at the minute, just to say, all this is great, but does this stuff actually work, right? So this is measuring teams from our first engagement with them, all the way through to after we've done a number of different workshops and we've improved a number of their ways of working around some of these areas. So when we looked at this, teams that had a focus on testing, detection, and measurement of progress, they have 30% fewer defects in production overall. So that's quite a big number. These are not small teams that we're working with as well. These are multidisciplined product teams that work in tribes or work in squads, so that they're all multi-skilled as well. But they're often in numerous teams of up to 10, so they're quite big organizations. Okay, so more importantly as well, so outages cost businesses money fundamentally, and businesses, one of the biggest bits of value you can add, in my opinion, from implementing good practices around DevOps from a technology perspective and from a business value perspective, is the stats say here that your mean time to resolution, your MTTR, is 5 times faster than other teams. And for a lot of teams that are in here, it doesn't say it in here, but when you look at the data, this is actually down to seconds of downtime rather than minutes or hours. And then on average, there's a 98% CI/CD success. Why is it 98%? And when we say success, what do we mean by success? So success is it going basically all the way through the various levels of checks that are in place within those different pipelines, and then it basically deploying and a green tick going on the dashboard at the end. It's really, really important that we define what success is. a pipeline can still complete, but there might be issues. It might have sent something back to the developers. That's not what we mean here. We mean the pipeline is actually completed with a green tick, with success, exit code 0 if you prefer that line of methodology, that it has completed. So 98% across, this is over 5,000 pipeline executions, this metric here. So over 5,000 pipeline executions, 98% of them succeeded without error. Why is it that high? Because we have driven in through culture, through collaboration, through communication. We have driven into these teams the importance of testing, detecting, and measuring what they are doing, so that when they get to commit stuff to the repository and the pipeline is executed, it runs through successfully. We have effectively, we've modified some of these teams' behavior around making sure that they don't commit secrets into code. They move it into the proper location, into a key vault. All of these things through static analysis and through vulnerability scans all get picked up and things get stopped in pipelines. So we've effectively changed some of the developers' behavior to be a lot better and more better aligned to what we're trying to achieve. Okay, so just to wrap up then, some of the things in here we've talked about, and some of the things we've not. But there's 5 key lessons I think that if you're taking anything away from this talk, I'd love it to be these 5 things. Okay, so when it comes to DevOps and DevSecOps, not trying to differentiate between any here, but don't measure at a team level. You have to measure globally. So specifically for security, the goal of security is to help their business achieve goals, not get in the way. If we start measuring at a team level, we end up with teams that do great, teams that do not so great. Remember, one of the key principles DevOps is we win as a team and we lose as a team. We have to avoid that siloed thinking. So when we start to measure what success looks like, make sure we're measuring globally. The only way to predictably say how good we are doing is as a unit. Okay, so next one's quite a simple one, right? Measure outcomes via outputs. So measuring work that is not tied to tangible outcomes, for me, is a complete waste of time, right? What I mean by this is if you measure work that says, oh great, we did X, Y, and Z, okay, that doesn't really mean anything. There's no value delivered. But if we measure work that comes up to a tangible outcome, then again, all the better, really great, and we can see the value that we have provided by doing A, B, and C. So great example of this. I think it was one of Liam's tweets a couple of weeks ago, actually. There's a screenshot of someone who'd made 14,000 and something or other GitHub commits in the past year, and he was actually talking about work-life balance. And I think he was boasting a little bit about it, actually. And I replied back to him saying, but what if those 14,000 commits are either low quality or documentation edits? You know, you don't know what those commits actually are. Those 14,000 commits could be really low value, really low quality against a team that has done 10 commits, you know, one a month throughout 10 months of the year. But they have increased the business's revenue, they've increased customer satisfaction, all of these things. Those are the ones that are going to be viewed more favorably than the 14,000 that someone has made. You know, quality is not something that you can measure by quantity, fundamentally, is the message there. So when we talk about maturity thresholds, right, so this is an interesting one. So I designed a maturity assessment for us to do with our clients. And then in one of the slides, I say, right, maturity threshold, forget it, right? Don't prioritize resilience over your notion of maturity. And then they say, well, we've just bought this service off you, what you're trying to say, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, actually what we're trying to say is maturity is important, right? Because we have to know where we started and where we're going and where we've come from. And we have to know that we are maturing in the right direction. We don't want to do a load of work, feel as though we're doing really good, do a load more work, improve in some areas and get worse in areas that we've visited already. We want to make sure it all goes up evenly and in a nice order. However, if you are if you are fundamentally placing all of your time on measuring maturity thresholds, right, that is not a great thing for you to be doing. You want to be prioritizing resiliency over any notion of maturity. Resilience is really the fundamental part of why you are doing this ultimately. Okay, so don't miss the forest for the trees. This is quite a simple one, but when you focus on individual components too much, or individual parts of an application, parts of a process, you can get so focused that you miss the bigger picture. And we spend so much time in DevOps making sure that we don't miss the bigger picture through the various things that we've put in with our different teams. That this is something that can happen when you start focusing on something new. So always remember to put your head up above the trees and look across the forest and make sure that you are in line with everyone else and that you are on the same point of messaging as everyone else. It's really, really important. Okay, so the last one, little bit controversial, as I found out at the last talk I did about this and the hour-and-a-half conversation afterwards about whether I was right or wrong. But don't try to measure failure. Okay, so failure is inevitable. We are humans, right? We fail. Sometimes we make small mistakes and the failure is absolutely nothing. Sometimes we make big mistakes and the failure is huge. However, a lot of the time, especially in technology, there is so much outside of our control that can lead to failure that incentivizing the avoidance of failure is completely unrealistic. Right? What do I mean by this? Right, one of the things that drives me nuts about a lot of the companies we work for is that they have internally OLAs on their applications availability, but it's based on the platform's availability, yet they're running on AWS or they're running on Azure. Right? Those organizations control the availability of that platform. You have little input to it. You will be incentivized as an organization if that platform is unavailable and you've designed to their best practice. You'll get credits back. There is no point in basing your incentives for your teams on the avoidance of failure. Right? There is no point in measuring things like overall availability, response times. There is so much out of your control. What you should be measuring instead is your mean time to recovery. So mean time to recovery is a meaningful metric because that is measuring the time it takes on average for us to recover from when we first noticed a failure to when service is restored. That is something that is way more tangible, that we can monitor a lot more effectively and means a lot more to the organization, because we can directly say that lower recovery times means that we get service up a lot quicker, rather than spending hours in major incident meetings and all of the other nonsense that happens at large organizations when it comes to major incidents that happen. I remember working for some large organizations and spending weeks on end after various incidents in goodness knows how many meetings about what happened, who was at fault, who's to blame, all of these kind of things that are quite, you look back now, you do things on DevOps and you think, wow, those meetings were actually about trying to pin the blame on someone rather than find out what happened. And if you were lucky in those meetings, you figured out a way to make it not happen again. So don't try and set your organization up to be like that, because that is what will happen if you start to incentivize the avoidance of failure. Start to measure other metrics instead. Okay, so that's basically it for me. So a little bit of a different way of approaching it, looking at some of the theory and how and why first, and then looking at some of the tooling to be able to do that. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, well, I've got one. I agree entirely about the failure is not an option approach being a negative thing. So don't worry, you're not going to get any pushback from me on that one. The main one is culture. The picture you can paint is one of being overwhelmed by the threats, the risks, and the sheer amount of work and that's necessary. Similarly, how do you mitigate that? How do you build confidence in your clients that it's not an overwhelming tsunami of problems and risks?
So can you just repeat the first bit again? You broke up a little bit. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. The if I can remember it, the fact that the picture you can paint is one of high risk and a tsunami of risks and potential problems, issues, technical debt. That the threat surfaces are endless. How do you from a cultural point of view, or even from a morale point of view, how do you stop that eating into confidence and the like?
Okay, so do you mean more around the number of threats that are out there, and how do you make sure that your developers, your operations teams, and everyone involved generally doesn't get hooked up on the fact that there are things to protect against rather than delivering what they're meant to deliver? Is that
there's that. There's also just the fact that if you did an analysis of someone, you went in and did the analysis of someone's top to bottom implementation, infrastructure, environments, everything, you could come up with a backlog that's got about 500 stories in it, and and about 50 of them are like must do now. They're their top priority. That's a risk. Or obviously it can be managed, but how do you deal with that scenario?
Yeah, no, good question. So when we're doing a maturity assessment, it's designed in two ways, right? So when we ask a question against one of the pillars that's in there, one of the categories that we have, we ask them how important that specific point is to them. Because in different organizations, because DevOps can be done so differently, something that is very important to my organization may not be important to your organization. So it's really important that we capture whether that notion is actually something that matters to you or not. And then we would ask, so what is your current organizational maturity level 1 to 5? So if you say that, 1, this is not important to you, and your current level of maturity in it is also 1 because you have no real interest in doing it, then it actually doesn't flag up on the overall report at the end. So you actually get rid of quite a lot of things like that. So because again, there's a risk that you could even end up with a list of 100 things, like you say, and 50, 60 of them, whatever, are things that we know we're never going to solve. Because they're not important to us, so we just leave them off altogether. So what you ultimately get at the end is between 10 and 15 usually. Sometimes we get less, but generally between 10 and 15 things that are highlighted in order of importance, based on the gap between the two numbers. What is important to fix, and we'll actually review them as a team and talk about them as a team. Because for all intent and purposes, when I'm doing this with a client, I'm part of their DevOps advocacy team. I don't work for the organization, but I am part of their organization for this. I'm on this journey with them. So it's important for me to understand what their level of thinking is, for me to then go off and act upon how I'm going to help them to fix it if they don't know how they're going to fix it. So once we have that list, that curated list, I guess, at the end of say 10 things to look through, we talk about those 10 things and we talk about whether the assessment is fair. So we're almost like going through and revalidating what we've come up with. And quite often, you'd actually be really surprised to hear that very often most of the things that come up are things that can be fixed within 1 to 2 months or weeks, rather than we need to get rid of this person, and this person. That's not what the exercise is about at all. It's around highlighting where they are against things that they say are important to them. So we get rid of a lot of the noise, I guess, primarily. To answer your question directly, we get rid of a lot of the noise first and foremost. And secondly, it's around, it sounds really corny, but it's around having that open and honest conversation with the rest of the team as to, look, this is saying we need to look at these 10 things. First of all, do you agree with the 10 things on here? If not, why? And if you do agree with it, what do you think as a team is the best way to fix it? Because it's no good me sitting there as a consultant and saying, look, we've come up with these 10 things. We need to do this workshop. We need to start teaching you A, B, C, and D. Joe sits over in operations, right? He's clearly a detractor. We're going to go to HR and tell them to get rid of him. You know, it's not about any of those things. It's about working together as a team and using the experience I have and the rest of my team to be able to go in and say, well, actually, that is a really good idea. But another organization that's fairly similar to you, we had the same issue and we did this. And that's one of the pieces of value that you add in as any consultant in technology, really, is that experience of doing it somewhere else. One of the things from experience that makes people the most comfortable about what you're talking to them about and the deficiencies you found in their processes or their technology or their ways of doing things is simply by saying, it's okay because I was at so-and-so other finance company or whatever industry and they had the same problem. You know, when they start to realize that what's being highlighted is something that would get highlighted at 9 out of 10 businesses, because let's face it, most businesses at the minute work and operate in the same way. This is why we're doing it. That actually helps quite a lot. So, you know, there's the personable side of it as well, but fundamentally it's around working together and making sure that you relate to what they're trying to achieve and making sure you fundamentally understand their business and what their goals are.
Cheers. I just really want to quickly follow up on that. Is when you say eliminating the noise, do you mean there, for example, you are making a balanced judgment of low risk vulnerabilities, for example, or low risk process kind of malformed processes? Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely what it is. You know, if you think about what I was saying at the beginning, right? If you're a science, so say you're the Oxford vaccine group at the minute, one of the most sensitive things you have is the decoded RNA data of COVID-19, because you're creating a vaccine for it, hopefully. Again, in the movies, you would see some superhero rappelling down the windows to break into the laboratory and plug a USB stick in, have it all downloaded and walk out the building like nothing's ever happened. Right? But in reality, we all know that, okay, yes, you might put that up on a risk register or a report somewhere that your building is vulnerable to access from above, because organizations do that level of detail. We can write that risk off 9 times out of 10 because we know it's highly unlikely to happen. It's more about the 80-20 rule, right? So working on the 80% of stuff that you know will have an impact and you know has value to solve, versus leaving that 20%, which is of low value, will not make that much of a difference if you fix it, or will get fixed because you fix other things along the way. And it is around that balancing act, absolutely, and making that judgment call based on experience, to say that actually I see what you guys are saying. If we fix this will help. But if we focus a bit more time over here and fix this, then you will also solve these other things as well. Yeah. And also it's the generic capability that you are tuned in to security, vulnerabilities, security as a source of work, and that then you can respond to that work. And then it doesn't matter. Yeah, then if something in the noise, a low risk becomes a higher risk for some external factor, or because it's got a chained vulnerability with some other vulnerability, you know you've got the capability to fix it once you've identified it. Yeah,
yep, exactly. Yeah. All right, no worries. Okay, I think that's all the questions.
Liam. There is something wrong with Liam. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, don't know what's going on. I lost my internet for a brief moment as well. So thank you, Martyn and Louise, for coming this evening and speaking. 2 fantastic talks. So, Misha, do you want to do the prize draw?
Yes, Liam, I do. Right, so I'll do my own drum roll. If you want to chime in, then feel free. It's a monthly thing. And the winner of the JetBrains license for this month's DevOps Knots is Nicole Stevens. Yay! Woo!
So what we'll do with that, Nicole, is if you're watching on YouTube or here, what we'll be doing is we'll DM you with that license key and all the instructions you need to redeem it. So once again, thank you everybody for coming this evening. Next month we'll be taking part on the 24th of October, and we've got Gregor Sutty, who is one of the Azure MVPs, coming to talk to us. He hasn't quite decided on what that will be yet, so that'll be coming. And did we get the other one confirmed as well, Misha?
Yeah, I haven't technically confirmed it, but I'm going to drop him in it now. Mark Jones should be joining us next month. I will confirm this, but I think that he really does want to do the talk. So it was unfortunate that he couldn't make it today.
Cool, fantastic. Well, so thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you again next time.
I think you meant to say the 27th potentially.
Possibly the 27th. Yes, the 27th. That's what I meant, not the 24th.
okay.
That's a Saturday.
It is.
And
Yeah.
I was looking at entirely the wrong month.
And no one will be here then.
No one will be here then. So yes,
No.
it is the 27th of October. Sorry.
It's quite all right. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming.
There is a dog that has appeared. So I've